A little get to know you, all right? Raise your hand if you enjoy playing video games. That's what I expected. Everybody's hand goes up. Oh yeah, raise your hand. Okay. Raise your hand if you enjoy watching other people play video games. Oh wow, very surprised by that one. Okay, it's the same sense. All right. Keep your hands up if you enjoy watching games more than playing them. Okay. You like playing them more than watching. Very, very interesting. All right. Raise your hand if you've watched a video game-inspired movie or TV series. That's also pretty impressive. Okay. Stand up if you're wearing a cosplay or showing off your fandom with a comic, movie, show, or video game outfit or t-shirt of any kind. All right. We got some over here. Excellent. Oh, wow. Excellent. Bravo. Bravo. Okay. Now, for those standing, I want you to raise your hand if your fandom is in any way video game inspired. Okay, that's more than half. That's very impressive. Very impressive. Welcome. You can sit down now. I can stand the whole time. Welcome to How Video Games Drive Pop Culture. Video games are the largest form of entertainment in the world. Projected to reach 334 billion in 2023, video games are nearly 2.5 times larger than the movie and music industries combined, and are expected to grow another 40% in the next 4 years to 467 billion. Gaming is also the third largest community on Reddit. Video games contribute to nearly everything we see, do, and talk about. So how did we get here? What does that impact look like? And how do we proceed to make the most of our video game-driven world in the future? My name is Przybylski. I'm the founder of D20 Studios, and I have 17 years of experience in the game industry, ranging from board game design to some AAA experience as a producer at Electronic Arts. And for the last 7 years, I've been a full-time indie developer. And with me today, we have an outstanding panel of fellow game industry veterans. And panelists, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello everybody, I'm Jeff Peters. I've been in this silly industry for over 30 years now. A bunch of independent companies and big companies like SNK and Electronic Arts. I've made games from arcade games that you drop coins into, to every console and PC and platform that you can think of in that time frame. That has been a fun ride. Currently, I do development in virtual reality. Teach at the University of Utah as part of the video game program, run a non-profit organization here in Utah called the Utah Digital Entertainment Network, and do a lot of consulting with other groups. So that's me.
Yeah, I'm Joshua Watts. I've been doing contract work for about 7 years in the industry, and I'm just barely starting my own indie studio and working on our first commercial product. That's about it. Like video games.
Hey everyone, I'm Jonny Fewkes. I'm a game designer and founder of NoSleepGames. We just released our first game a few months ago, Annie and the AI, available on Steam.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bre Sorenson, and I'm a jittery person, so forgive me for the icebreaker, but oh my goodness, has this not been such a great FanX?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I've been in the game industry for about 7 years now. I've done everything in between AR, VR, mobile games, web games. I've seen the light in the dark of NFT games, and I absolutely love PC games. A couple of my projects right now are an NFT project with Panelists, as well as a personal project, Moniker VR, which is here this weekend.
I'm Austin West. I've been in the game industry for about 10 years. I've been working in Unity since 2012, and been making a few games. Mostly my specialty is like VR games and augmented reality, and I really specialize in more of like a horror and like surreal kind of trippy genre. And right now, like on the third floor, we're demoing one of our games, Synapse Shifts. It's a cool experience. Check it out. But yeah, so.
Thank you, panelists. So it's no surprise that video games have directly impacted all of our lives here. Personally, my earliest memory was watching my older brothers play games on the Intellivision system, like Tower of Doom, D&D, and the Thunder Castle was a big one.
Burger Time.
Yep, Burger Time, that was my dad's favorite, absolutely. And so naturally this led to a fascination with fantasy-themed games. I grew up eventually learning to like tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, Magic the Gathering, Hero Quest is another favorite. And that's what inspired my career and the game I make now that's called Avalon, which is a roguelike deck builder game available now on Steam. And so, yeah, it was interesting to think that Dungeons & Dragons, I was initially exposed to it through video games because it's been around for obviously a much longer time in tabletop form. And so I like to think that video games made it cool. So, panelists, how have video games impacted your life and driven your exposure to pop culture?
For me, it started with my career wanting to be a lawyer. I was a speech and debate brat in high school, and this video game phenomenon kind of came around and grew up around me, and I took a left turn, much to my parents' chagrin. I said it's a pretty dramatic way of affecting my life of going one path and going another, and frankly I haven't looked back since, from developing and making and doing a whole bunch of other stuff in the video game scene, as well as kind of how it's affected everything around us, from starting out as what some people perceived as a fad, they're going to go away, and the fact that we're now 50 years old as an industry, and I think we're pretty substantial now. I think we've shown the film industry that we got legs now. Oh yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was more like, when I was growing up, my parents ran a small business, and of course that means children are free labor. So we grew up having to work there all the time, and I was like, man, I really don't want to grow up. I'm gonna have to work a lot. This is gonna suck. And then I was like, oh, I could make video games. That'd be fun. And then I realized, oh, that's a lot of work. But by then I already liked it, so it's too late. Part of that also, the games, like, a lot of people see playing games or watching shows in like kind of a bad light. But for me, I think probably even more so than the work I had to do, like, on the business as a child, they kind of helped me develop a work ethic. Like you're playing Pokemon, and yeah, it seems like you're just wasting time, but you're chasing this goal, and to get this goal, you have to like put in a lot of hours doing something that sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't really like it, and they really kind of build the foundation of building a good work ethic. And to me, that's what I felt video games impacted me the most, as well as giving me a nice career that I can actually enjoy sometimes.
For me, I've enjoyed video games my whole life, but I think the turning point from just enjoying them to being obsessed was when I played Knights of the Old Republic. And I've always loved stories as well as video games. And when I realized the power that a video game could have in telling a story, an interactive story, I always loved Star Wars, and suddenly I was in Star Wars, and that changed me forever and made me want to make my own games where I could tell powerful stories within an interactive medium.
So I was the kid that grew up with Nintendo. So we had an N64. I'm a little young, guys. But I absolutely had so much fun watching my dad play Star Fox, and getting to play Diddy Kong Racing and what was it called, Dr. Mario. Some of those were a lot of fun for us, and we grew up in that house playing Tetris Wars together, and we still do. We're all in our mid-20s, mid-30s now, and we sit down and we will Tetris battle each other for hours when we get the chance, and it's so much fun. Growing up, after I moved out and got married, I got exposed to the world of MMO. Vanilla is my favorite flavor. I absolutely adore Classic Warcraft. And one of the most beautiful games I've seen is WildStar. And going through and experiencing these video games, watching some of them die, has really impacted kind of the experience and expectation that I've had for the way that games are experienced
grew up with Nintendo. My earliest memories are playing like Donkey Kong Country 2 and Super Mario World on Super Nintendo. And ever since then, it's like every day after school, play some video games. It's kind of like a relaxing release. I was always like playing Halo 3 Forge map, you know, making custom maps, or I think you guys played Gary's mod. Like, that's kind of the game that really got me into wanting to like develop games. Is that game's all about just building your own stuff. But my favorite game of all time is Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4. Like, any Bethesda game like that, where you get your own like choices and what you say, you can like make each choice and see what the different outcome is. I wish it was more like real life, you know how like we can just reload the save that you did right before like the conversation. But I like to see how different outcomes go and then redo it again. But essentially, I've taken that philosophy kind of in life and try and think ahead of like in any future conversation, like what are the things I could say based on this person, what's going to be their response, you know, so I've taken that and like utilized it in my own life.
Thank you very much. All right, from our humble beginnings with the release of Space Invaders and the Atari to now taking over the world, how did we get here? I'm going to turn this one over to Jeff, our most senior veteran expert in the field of video games.
So for those of you that don't know, the University of Utah and Lagoon in concert can be thanked for actually a video game industry existing. Because Nolan Bushnell was working the arcade at Lagoon at the time, saw this thing called computer space at the University of Utah as being run on a mainframe, had this idea of, ooh, I could put a coin mech on this and it was computer space was a huge failure. This was long before Space Invaders. But his next release kind of took over the world, which was Pong. And nobody knew what to make of it. And all of the other copycats and people trying to capitalize on this new business model exploded in the late 70s and 80s. And you had an equal number of people that loved it and adored what was happening, and those that hated, wanted to vilify it and shut it all down. By the mid 80s, you know, the perception is it crashed with the Atari 2600 and too many Me Too arcade games and such. And at that point in time, we thought, okay, the fad is done. But as an industry, we kind of crawled out of that with the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System and never looked back. And we've been growing as both an industry and as fun ever since. As I mentioned earlier, you know, 50 years later, we've now taken over the world. And not only just as video games itself being the #1 form of entertainment in the world and still growing from a business point of view, but influencing pretty much everything that we do. From like what Ross mentioned, the number of people in outfits inspired by video games, to TV shows, to YouTube, to Twitch, personalities. It's absolutely crazy that video games have become the tip of the spear for most of the entertainment that we have now. And we as all of us here as consumers, we all have different ways that we consume video game content, from watching reviews and playthroughs to cosplay to buying merchandise, or heaven forbid, actually playing games these days. But it's crazy the amount of time that we spend looking at not just playing the game, but all the ways I mentioned, and even more of how getting up in the morning, we consume video game content. And everybody sitting here has already explained different ways that they consume it, and you can think about your own play habits of whether you're watching or playing or buying or purchasing or investing in or developing. That's become our world now. And at the moment, I don't see us turning back. And at 50 years old, we're a legitimate industry, even in entertainment, where everybody else is receding, flatlining, or going backwards. We're still growing. How's that for a quick romp through history?
That was excellent, thank you. I was actually intrigued to learn how Lagoon had impacted that history. That was something that I hadn't known myself.
Yeah, literally, granted we're all sitting here in Utah, but if it wasn't for these factors, there would not be a video game industry. Maybe someone else would have done it, but it was the perfect thing to kick things off here. Speaking
of Lagoon, has anyone here ridden the new ride, Primordial? Raise your hands. Oh wow, you are in for a real treat. I highly recommend it. Take roller coasters, combine them with video games, that is Primordial. All right, we're going to dig now into some of the impacts that video games have had in pop culture. And The Last of Us is a series on HBO that did something not really done before. It was considered good. In fact, one of the best series of the year, regardless of the fact that it started its life as a video game. So what has changed that allowed this to happen when most video games to movie adaptations have been considered poor or average at best? And I'm going to start with Jonny on this one.
Awesome. Yeah, so Last of Us is a huge inspiration for me, being such a narratively focused game. So I could talk about this for hours, but I forced myself to find the two primary reasons I think it was so successful. The first is that more so than most video games, I feel like Last of Us was closer to the film industry. If you've watched any of the behind the scenes, like the motion capture, I mean, those were actors that were, it was almost kind of like, Gollum from Lord of the Rings, So as game designers, Neil Druckmann was in there, like literally directing a video game, which made it a pretty clean transition when moving to actually directing a show. And of course, the game itself was very narratively focused and paced very well, all which translates very well to the screen. And I think the most important factor is that Neil Druckmann was in the room and that he had a say. It wasn't one of those projects where they just licensed it out and an entirely different group of people took it and did what they wanted with it. They had the game designer of the original game in there making all those key decisions.
Thanks, Jonny. And Last of Us wasn't the only one that was a hit. Bre, I believe you had some words to say about the Mario movie.
Yeah, so who in here knows and maybe has seen clips of the Mario TV show from way back when? I'm seeing that. I'm so happy. I've seen clips of it on I can't sit through more than like 10 minutes of it because that is a stretch from my attention span, right? But how different is that from what we had this summer with the Mario movie? It's a night and day difference. And I think that what we've been capable of in the last 5-10 years is really adapting things as well as interpreting them in a way that respects what was and makes it prevalent and something that we can identify with nowadays. And it's not just the Mario movie. Has anybody seen the Gran Turismo movie? Yeah? Isn't it so cool how Gran Turismo became pop culture for a lot of people? It was a really impeccable sim to the extent that there are drivers who got to race tracks in real life because of their experience in a game. Like, how incredible is that? I think that our ability in storytelling with game making is what enables us to transition into pop culture so well. I went to the Assassin's Creed panel last night, and there's the most incredible stories in games, and we love that, and we need that. And that's why we're seeing it today.
Thank you, Bre.
To add to that really quick, when you look at the history of where we've gone from video games, from the Atari 2600 to today, storytelling in games used to be a joke. Mario was Rescue the Princess. Tomb Raider always had bad writing, and we all just wrote it off as, yeah, that's video game, right? Nobody really cares. But one of the things that's interesting when you look in recent years, and especially focusing on Last of Us 2, it's the first game in the history of our business where all of the reviews were talking about the story. Everyone was talking about the playability, the interactivity, how well did the character move, was the gunplay fun, was the battles fun? Everybody was arguing about the story. And for a video game to be judged on its story for the first time in history is a major point in time to really think about, because it's never going to be the same now going forward, recognizing that we as consumers, we're now demanding good story and good writing out of video games.
Thank you, Jeff. Pokemon Go became a cultural phenomenon, raking in billions of dollars by getting people to go outside again. audience, who has played Pokemon Go here? All right. Wow. I love this crowd. You guys are great. Who still plays Pokemon Go? All right. Not bad, not bad. Okay. Josh, what is the lasting impact from this, showing what is possible with the right content and features?
Yeah, well, Pokemon Go, I think, I mean, if you look at the game itself, there's not all that much going on. It's like Pokemon, but simpler, easier, less work. But, like, that's not what the game is designed to do. It's designed to connect people and get people to, talk to each other, which, as technology's been getting better, as we've kind of like moved to cities, but we don't really know anyone around us. We kind of do our own thing, get to work, always chasing the career. It's kind of like, Active is kind of like a community center type thing. Like all these people you didn't know, didn't care about, all of a sudden show up playing this game. It's like, I need to interact with these guys to catch my Squirtle. And pretty soon you care about it. It's like they did a really, really amazing job getting people to connect, probably more than they even anticipated. I mean, it blew up like crazy all around the world, and like was a hugely positive impact on society as a whole. And games going forward, there's now pretty much a genre of games that are pretty similar to what Pokemon Go is doing, each in their own little aspect. There probably will never be one that captures it as well as Pokemon Go did, at least not for a long time. But now there's these own little niches of games that it's like, it's not about you playing a game, it's about you getting outside, going into the real world, and like experiencing life with this game, kind of like pushing you to do it and pushing you to find things that, in the game there's not that much going on. It's a little bit, just enough to get you to go and experience real awesome things outside.
And it makes money for Starbucks when they push you to go to their stores.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of getting outside and the activities of doing things outside of just playing the game itself, from a data point of view, we actually now spend more time watching others play games to see the content than playing them ourselves. And I know that contradicts earlier with our little hand raise thing, but this is what things are saying, that more people are watching games than playing nowadays. So this introduces numerous considerations for game developers. For example, how important is content creation for the marketing exposure of new games? Is it necessary to develop features specifically to engage streamers? Does content creation become an issue for designers who create story or puzzle-driven games, like The Last of Us 2? Do you have any reason to buy it after you've watched your favorite streamer play through the whole game? I'm going to turn this one over to Jonny. How does the prevalence of streaming impact your development?
Let me start by asking a question of the audience. How many of you have played the Like a Strange series? Raise a hand. Awesome. So I had kind of a crash course in Twitch when I was getting close to releasing Annie and the AI, because I hadn't really used it much before. But when we were auditioning for the voice actress for our main character Annie, Katie Bentz blew us away. She's a prevalent streamer and was a voice actress in Life is Strange True Colors, the voice of Steph. It was really fun to just kind of learn about Twitch through her and to get to know her amazing community and just see how passionate they were. And absolutely, with my game being having a short 3-hour runtime and being mostly about the story, I was a little nervous about having her stream the game, but it definitely seemed to be a huge positive, and it ended up being the core of my marketing outreach for the game. It also happened to be my favorite thing about the entire process, to just see these streamers. I knew Katie, but some of the streamers were strangers to me, and to just watch them experience my game and to to experience the devious twists and turns I put in as a game designer, and then the places where we tug on your heartstrings with our story, and to see how their entire audience is emoting to that as it's happening was just amazing. Made it all worthwhile.
Austin, did you want to jump in on this one too?
Well, so I will say I'm not a huge viewer of like the streaming. I've tried to do it myself. I usually don't like to talk and just like play through. And I use the same thing as like I'll hop on and watch someone if I get stuck on a game, almost like a walkthrough. But sometimes it's kind of cool just to watch people actually enjoying this game and see how everyone like responds to the same game. Like, because you could load up a Call of Duty and you'd have the same people playing it, and everyone has different reactions to different things. Some people are like walking around just like looking at rocks on the ground to see the textures, or some people are just running straight into the battle, and other people are. It's just cool to see how other people play it, and then try and like take that feedback into your own gameplay.
Do we have any aspiring indie game developers in the audience? Raise your hand. Okay. Big tip. Getting streamers, content creators to play your game is probably the #1 single marketing thing you can do to get your game discovered. I speak that from experience, getting our game on Steam. That was the hands-down thing that made the difference between being a game that no one ever heard of to being a game that became very popular and was able to reach its target audience. So absolutely, it is a critical part of where we are now in society, and it's absolutely important to find ways to build a game that can connect with a personality, and a personality can connect with the audience for who you're developing that game for. Okay, moving on to technology and the impact of video games there. Many major companies are investing heavily into VR and AR these days. For example, Facebook, or Meta as it's now called, has invested $10 billion annually to the metaverse. How are video games driving these new technologies? And we're going to start with Bre on this one.
All right. So I've had the opportunity to study VR since it came out. Like, I was there for the first headset launch. We ordered ours, it came, we were so excited. And there's a lot that you can do in virtual reality. It's just phenomenal how much we've grown and how much space we have to grow still. But one of the things that everyone comes back to is, oh, I'm so bored. What do I do? What do I do in VR? There's games. I mean, we're getting into a space now where Meta's and Apple's headset is really trying to push watching movies. We're expanding on some of that technology where, yeah, you can sit and you can be on your computer in VR. You can scroll through social media in VR. But really what we always seem to come back to is getting to live an experience and live a story. Getting to game the game inside of VR. And we've been seeing that with augmented reality. It's had its hills and valleys as well. I had the opportunity to work on an augmented reality project last summer where the pitch of the idea was to take an experience that you would have in a very unique location and to bring it to your dinner table so that every person at that dinner table can sit and enjoy this show over a meal. And then towards the end of the meal, they'd be able to interact with the show and their food at the same time, and they would affect each other. So that's one of the boundaries that we're trying to push. And it sounds crazy. It sounds like it doesn't make sense at all. But it's something that we're making an effort to do. We're trying to take the enjoyment and the games that we have in this virtual space, and we're trying to bring it into real life. And that's what's pushing us so hard to try and incorporate all of this into our everyday lives.
Thank you, Bre. And Austin.
All right, so I mean, VR, it came out about 10, 12 years ago or so when it first started hitting the market. Now it's officially like pretty much ready. Like, I'm sure you guys all know someone that at least has an Oculus Quest or something like that. One of the biggest things I think that's going to be happening in the next few years, which I'm most excited about, is I love Elon Musk's Neuralink. I'm so excited to get one of those. Might be the third tester, like I'm not going to be the first. But one of the cool things, so in Cyberpunk 2077, his now ex-wife Grimes, the singer, she was a voice actor and actress, mocap actress in the game. And Elon actually went while she was recording, and because he's making the Neuralink, and the whole point in Cyberpunk is you have a brain chip and you're hacking things. So he went on a podcast and was talking about how influential that was in implementing some features into Neuralink. So pretty soon we're going to be able to just experience, you'll be at working at McDonald's or something, and you're playing a video game in your head while you're working. Or you'll be able to develop a video game just laying in your bed. You're not going to have to get up and use a keyboard and mouse. That's the type of stuff that it's kind of scary to think about, but I'm excited for us to get to that point. But like heavily with all the technology that games are trying to implement, most stuff is like futuristic or like post-apocalyptic. We're kind of seeing that like Terminator intro. I want to see if we can, how we're going to navigate that in the future, but I'm so stoked for the Neuralink. Like, yeah.
And Jeff, you're developing some kind of a VR pod, I believe. How are video games influencing that?
So VR actually started, from a consumer point of view back in the 90s. I refer to it as VR part 1. Technology wasn't ready, we weren't ready, and it died a very painful death along with the word cyber back then. Today, as they mentioned, all right, we actually have a VR industry and technology that can drive it. But we also have, although games are usually the tip of the spear when it comes to new hardware, new technology, new advances, and that was the early adoption. We're also seeing VR and AR specifically used for all sorts of other industries: virtual tourism, teaching, education, museum experiences, training, manufacturing, and taking what everybody's learned from making video games, which is video games are entertainment, which also makes the concepts sticky. You remember them, you want to come back to them. And I'm sure you've all heard the term gamification before, and that's basically taking the concepts that we use in video game making and development and bringing it to, shall we say, boring industries in order to make those activities sticky and memorable. Marketing and advertising agencies love this concept of, ooh, I can put you in a VR experience, and you walk out of there with memories, hopefully of my brand specifically. And so when you look at where VR is going, there's a lot that's being done specifically for entertainment to just bring us joy and have fun. But so much of the knowledge of how we make these things and why they're good is now transcending into all of these other ways that VR is being done, and also with AR. And the company's trying to figure out, well, what the heck do we do with AR? And we haven't seen mass adoption of AR applications or AR games because no one's been able to figure out, and there's all sorts of other problems in that world, but that's kind of the connective tissue between where VR is going and what we're doing now.
That's a good segue to my next question about gamification and the impact of video games in the general everyday use of society. And to give another example outside the VR world of where that's being applied, my 2 kids are in school right now, and they are playing an RPG game for class. Each kid actually has a class they pick out, very similar to a D&D class, like a healer, a mage, or a guardian. And they use this in the classroom as a tool for both promoting positive behavior, as in you get XP and level up for behaving good in class and helping your classmates and doing your homework on time. And it is proven to be incredibly effective. It's one of the best ways to get kids performing well in the classroom. So, what is it about the design of video games that makes them so compelling that we are now using games as a model for these kinds of everyday activities? Jonny, I'm going to turn to you.
Yeah, sure. So I love the idea of gamification, and we see a lot of places where it's being, suddenly something that never would have had anything like it has a point system and a level up system. But of course, as a game designer, I think that we could always go further and should go further to really make it engaging. And as any of these other game designers can tell you, like, we're obsessed with immersion in our games, and we spend so much time tweaking our mechanics and getting right into that sweet spot of, like, something that's interesting and challenging, but not too challenging. You don't want it to be so challenging that it's frustrating or too easy to where it's boring. One of my biggest problems all throughout grade school is that it just seemed like a whole lot of rote memorization, just reading from a book. it wasn't interactive, and in terms of that immersion, I was always either bored or frustrated. Like, it was so rare to get that sweet spot, and I really don't see why learning can't be gamified, and like as a game designer would do it in such a way that it's exciting and like you're engaged and you're learning. Like, you know, every once in a while I would take a class that I actually enjoyed, like, and just feel so invigorated by it and be like, wait, I thought I was in school, but like school could be like that. We just have to make it immersive and design it properly.
And Josh, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. No, I think gamification is a good thing. It's pretty much, I mean, I see it as like learning from what games are doing right and trying to apply it to other stuff. You know, like, when would anyone, you know, before some of these awesome farming games come out, think that picking carrots is fun? Like, no, it's not. But for some reason, we'll sit there in front of a computer and pick carrots for hours. Knowing why is really helpful, because there's all these tasks we got to do in life, like, you know, that really suck. And why should they suck? You know, if picking carrots can be super fun, then, you know, why can't, like, I don't know, doing your taxes? Probably not. But, you know,
I can't wait to see the tax video game. That's going to be great. All right, guys, it's tax time. Let's see who can get some achievements here.
Exactly.
The tax dating simulator.
Yeah, next big idea right there.
No, it's already.
Patent pending.
It's already a thing.
Oh, it's already a thing? Oh, wow.
Oh, we missed it.
I missed that. I didn't, that's new to me. Okay.
By the way, how many of you own a Fitbit or an Apple Watch? And you count steps with those? You know, there's a prime example, a very simple one, of gamification invading your real life. So that's your healthcare that has now been gamified. And you can look at similar systems used in all sorts of different things, not just picking carrots, but they're now bleeding into the most mundane things. Reward systems for credit cards, or staying at hotels or airline. Okay? That's a gamification of making you want to do it again and giving you positive feedback when you perform like they want you to.
Yeah, it all comes down to psychology. You've got the extrinsic, which is anything that is motivated by reward. I got a badge, I got an achievement, I got a new avatar unlocked for my character. Those are the extrinsic form, and it's very highly effective, especially in kids at school, like I was mentioning. And then you have the intrinsic motivation, which is the things where you start to enjoy just the activity itself. So when you can move towards something where the actual act of doing that thing is now no longer motivated because you're just getting rewards, but because I actually enjoy this activity, that's where the real magic comes in. And those are the kind of players that tend to stick around and keep going and being with it. And the more we can kind of ingrain those activities into our everyday life, the more positive and uplifting everything can be in everyday life. All right, so conventions like FanX allow us to experience fan art, cosplay, and all sorts of other creative expressions of our larger video game world, reflecting, in a sense, who we are and who we want to be. And so my next question is, video game fandom still relegated to nerd culture, or have we finally transitioned to become mass market? And is this a good thing or a bad thing? And we're going to go and ask everyone in the panel. So Jeff, if you want to go ahead and start.
I can look at it by the numbers, looking at the size of the industry and how many billions of people on Earth play video games. And if you just look at it from a numbers point of view, nerddom has taken over. When you look at a Marvel movie or a comic book hero that can, you know, churn a $1 billion film, that shows where our interests are, how they've expanded, and although the concept of nerds and geeks and people that read comic books, things used to be relegated to, you know, the guys with glasses shoved in lockers at school. I think it's, yeah, I can relate to it as well. I think it's now all of us. I mean, I look at if someone calls me a nerd, yeah, and where it is a badge of honor. Because when you look at how we consume our own entertainment and what our interests are, we've kind of taken over the world, and I have the numbers to back it up.
Video games made nerds cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say It's kind of both. I mean, you know, what was the definition of a nerd? Being different than everyone else and you know, doing something that not everyone else did. Maybe that's not it, but close enough. It's, you know, when everyone's doing it, it's not that weird of a thing anymore. And games are kind of, you know, you don't have to, there's enough variety of different types of games, films, movie, anime, whatever it is, that, you know, you can be any type of person and still enjoy that stuff. I mean, you know, yeah, generally playing games, it's not a social thing, but sometimes it is. And, you know, sometimes you are a social person that does play a game. And I think that generally as more people play it, more people try it. You know, when it first came out, people were afraid of it. They're like, oh, it's weird. All these people playing it, they must have problems. Like, I've never played this thing. How could you sit in one spot for 7 hours? Well, yeah.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's both. Sitting isn't great for you, but video games can still teach you stuff. Anything you enjoy, and you know that comes from work, games, learning stuff. If you enjoy it, you'll get something out of it, and that's an important part of it. So yeah, I think it's a good thing overall because we do enjoy it. Otherwise, we wouldn't play it. It's my choice.
Johnny, are video games still nerd culture? Are we mass market? And is that good or bad?
Yeah, you know, this might be a little anecdotal, but I used to always refer to myself as a gamer, and then not too long ago I kind of stopped doing it because it didn't seem like that much of a distinguishing characteristic of me as like a personality, because everybody's playing games now. Like, we're all gamers, so yeah, I definitely think that we've taken over. I agree with Josh that it's you know, it's a mixed bag. It's good, it's bad, but I know that there's no turning back for me. I've been playing since regular Nintendo, and just watching the industry evolve, and I just can't wait to see what comes next.
So, I mean, a lot of opinions have already been shared on this, and I agree, you know, it can be good, it can be bad. But with that, I'd like to express a bit of a concern. With the way social media is, with the way games are, with the way that Twitch streaming is, and, you know, you add on top of that our competitive culture, one of the things that, you know, we see a lot of is a loss of identity. You're not a nerd anymore. You're not yourself. And suddenly, because of social media, all of these identities that we used to have, I'm a daughter, or I'm a sister, or, you know, I don't know my aunt, but she likes to pinch my cheeks. Those things that we used to use to identify ourselves don't matter anymore because we can't communicate them to other people, and other people don't see them as important. So, I guess what I'm trying to express is that, you know, it's wonderful that this culture is something that we can share, but we also really need to be patient with each other and patient with that competitive nature that we all seem to have, because we're losing our self-identity, and we're losing the ability to respect others and their identities that they have for themselves.
Yeah, so one huge example I would say, so like the main question is like nerd culture associated with video games, right? Here's one thing that I think a lot of people miss when they think of video games is how many people play Madden that are like full-on sports jocks, right? That's a video game. Why are you playing football when you already go out and play football? Do you call them a nerd? I mean, it's kind of like a blurred line now. And another example, it's kind of a mixed one, but Henry Cavill, right, played Superman, right? Everyone is in love with this giant actor, right? He's obsessed with The Witcher. They got him on board. The main project was because he reached out to them and started like inquiring, like, hey, can I play Geralt? You know? And now, I mean, he's doing all sorts of things. He's trying to revive, do Red Dead Redemption right now. Like, all these like super famous actors that everyone that even doesn't play video games just consumes, like Marvel. Like 10 years ago, before the Avengers, like superhero movies were kind of nerdy, right? Now everyone has seen a Marvel movie at least once or more. But it's like I said, it's like nerd is like almost like a badge of honor now in my book. Like I'd like to be known as a nerd because nerds are like revolutionizing technology, keeping us going forward. New cars, new computers, new phones. I don't know. And video games kind of stem at they're like the root of everything. Kind of branches out from there.
I saw a hand pop up in the audience there. You want to jump in with something?
Yeah, Henry Cavill actually let the call from his agent go to voicemail because he was playing World of Warcraft and he was in the middle of the game.
Yes, I saw that. That was awesome. It was a great interview. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Thank you for bringing that
I
up.
don't know what server he's on.
If you find out.
My own personal take, I don't know if we've quite reached the mass market status yet, in the sense that I think there's a lot of folks out there who are in fact gamers, but wouldn't identify themselves as such. Anyone who plays Candy Crush on their phone, you're a gamer. Anyone who plays solitaire on their computer while having their coffee, you're a gamer. Anybody who goes to school and is a level 5 wizard and casting spells to save their students is a gamer. And whether we say gamer or not gamer, nerd or not, I think gaming has definitely made it cool to be a nerd. And yeah, we have a bright future. And is it a good or bad thing? My own personal take on that is it's definitely both. Video games can be incredibly toxic in the wrong moderation. So everything in moderation. They can be an influence for bad. They can be an influence for good, just like any other form of media and entertainment. All right, we've got time for, I've got a question right here. Let's go ahead and go with that.
I was just wondering, do you think there's a split in the culture where there's some that's like culturally acceptable across the board, and then there's some that it's like, okay, you have to be in this niche, and then you can take that badge of honor. And do you think that that is like positive, or is that negative on our society?
That's an excellent question. Does anyone want to take that?
I think a couple of interesting things on there is, since video games have now been around for about 50 years, we've now had 3 generations able to grow up with video games. Back in the 70s and 80s, the only people that played games were gamers by definition. And the only people that made games were gamers for gamers. Now we make games, we talk about audiences. Littlest Pet Shop targeted at 5 to 8-year-old girls, Nerf at 10 to 12-year-old boys, et cetera, et cetera. And as you get deeper into that world, you end up with sub-genres and sub-audiences and cliques and all sorts of things. Like, how many of you play Farming Simulator? A couple of you. It has a huge audience. It's very narrow, but they're very devoted, and they're on their 22nd iteration of that. Yeah, I know, it's weird when you look at it from an audience point of view. Or League of Legends, which has been around for a long time. And I'm probably going to offend somebody in this room, but I also find the League of Legends community is one of the most toxic communities out there, and hate playing the game because of the community. So your question of audiences, there are positive and negative audiences that, like, if you're a new player and you want to get into League of Legends, I'll look to you, that's painful. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I think that's the downside of it, just like was mentioned earlier about social media, is social media could be a good thing, but it has turned, frankly, into a bad thing. It's a cesspool, it's full of misinformation, people use it for the wrong reasons, and being anonymous in social media, no one's ever won an argument in social media, right? But everybody argues on it. Like, what's the point? So I completely agree with you that we have segmented ourselves to either belong or avoid different audiences, different game playing groups. There are some games that are universally accepted. We all play Mario, for example. We don't all play League of Legends. I've voiced my reason why I refuse to anymore. So I think that's where we've gotten to in a very complex society. And as a game maker, you have to acknowledge all of that when you start making a brand new game and really think about who's going to play my game, and am I doing the right things for that particular audience of people that I'm going after. So it is a complex equation now, and a lot more complicated than it was back in the 80s.
All right, we're just out of time now, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you so much to our panelists. If anybody